Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Sports Talk with Austin, your daily dose of entertainment. And tonight on the show, we're talking 2023 ACC Conference Preview. And what a conference it could turn out to be, or it could turn out to be a disaster. All depending on how things shape out. So let's talk about the ACC in 2022 before we jump to 2023. So last year, Clemson regained supremacy, but you had new teams coming up. Florida State made a rise late. North Carolina, made the ACC championship game. Drake May and company looked fantastic until they had that ending against Georgia Tech, the drop touchdown by Josh Downs. Sorry, North Carolina fans, but it's true. It happened. Syracuse looked good as well. They started the season off a perfect 6-0, and then after the Clemson game, had their heart taken out of them, and they just never recovered from that. And I feel like that kind of set Clemson up, for success. Because after they got rid of Syracuse, they were the schedule became easier, so to speak. But on the other hand, for Syracuse, it was a big downer for the Qs. Because let's be honest, they went downhill after that. Now, with all that being said, got a bunch of new coaching changes. A lot of things happened. Obviously, Scott Satterfield at my boys at Louisville is no longer there. He's over at Cincinnati. And now we welcome in Jeff Brom, welcome him home. And first season there, Brent Key, his first year at Georgia Tech. Some new faces, new places. Question how they're going to be. Is Florida State too hyped? I get it, Jordan Travis is a phenomenal, excellent football player, but is Florida State the team that everyone thinks they're going to be? I don't know. Can North Carolina repeat success? I don't know. It's going to be a lot of interesting things to find out. Can North Carolina keep it going? What about Pittsburgh? They're flying high under the radar. I don't know. I just do not know. And Jackson Johnson, welcome. What's up, ACC Nation? What's up, ACC Nation? Jackson Johnson also mentions Jeff Brom becoming the new head coach at Louisville is an awesome for both sides. I think it is as well. I think it can benefit both. We'll have to see. I know a lot of Purdue and Big Ten fans are saying be cautious. His clock management issues, well, they're a little troublesome. And Jackson Johnson also mentions FSU, Florida State seems overhyped. I agree. I think they're getting a little too much media attention. I get it. Jordan Travis is awesome, but he can't run the whole thing by himself. Now, what are my record predictions this year? Who do I think will fit where? Well, let's find out. My 2023 ACC standings and predictions. And for everyone out there in the comments, please like, subscribe. Make sure it helps the algorithm, helps me tremendously. And for everyone out there in the comments, feel free to leave your records, predictions, comments, and follow along if you would like. So let's start. And reminder, there are no divisions, so they're kind of like the Pac-12. They are kind of like the Pac-12 now. There's no more coastals, none of that. It all runs through 1 through 14. So let's start with number 1, and that is the Clemson Tigers at 11-1 and 7-1. There's a lot of interesting things going on with Clemson. It's been exaggerated for years that, maybe Dabo's fallen off. Maybe he's lost his touch coming off that abysmal season in a lot of Clemson fans' eyes because their offense wasn't what it once was. And 21 and 22, But now K. Klubnik's coming in. Hopefully he can spark some new offense and new spark in that offense. And looking at their schedule, I think they can go unbeaten, but you always expect that they're going to lose one game. And I think for Clemson, for me, the game that I have them losing is at NC State. I think NC State, catches them after Miami. I think NC State's going to be the team that kind of shocks some people. Kind of play spoiler. And looking at the other games that they could possibly lose, Florida State obviously is one. Could Duke catch them napping? Possibly. Maybe Miami. They got Notre Dame at home. That's very interesting. But for me, I think at NC State, that's going to be the game that catches them. So they're going to be playing look ahead to Notre Dame, and I think they're going to get them. North Carolina at home, November 18th. I think they could get them as well. South Carolina could get them again, but I just don't see it. And their non-con, their non-con is not very challenging. Charleston Southern, Florida Atlantic. Who are we kidding, people? Let's be honest. But yeah, Clemson for me 11-1. I think that's fair. I think they could go as far as unbeaten. I can also see them going as far as 10-2 because they could lose to Florida State. They could lose to North Carolina. But for right now, I have them number 1, and I think they're going to the ACC title game. And I think it's going to be hard because Clemson's always been the standard in the ACC. And Jackson Johnson points out, I feel like Dabo is back in 2023. I agree. I don't think he ever left. I think with the struggles that they had, I think that was some precautionary for Clemson fans. But, they tend to overreact. Jackson, as you know, as an Alabama fan, the fan bases tend to overreact. Now, speaking of overreact, number 2, I believe, will finish 9-3 and 6-2 in conference, Florida State. I also have them finishing right behind Clemson. I think it'll be Clemson, Florida State probably for the ACC title again. For the ACC title, not again, but for the first time. I think there's only 2 conference losses I could see Florida State taking. Obviously, I think they'll lose the opener to LSU. But then after that, they have Southern Miss, BC, then they have Clemson. I think Clemson's going to be one of the losses. And then you go down, they got at Pitt, and then they got Miami, then they got Syracuse, Virginia Tech. Who are we kidding? Those are no challenges. Pitt's going to upset Florida State at home. I think Pitt, they're a very slept-on team. I think they catch Florida State napping. I think Jordan Travis, he's phenomenal. He's more than likely going to be a Heisman contender in my book. Is he going to win it? Well, Caleb Williams might have something to say about that. And Drake May might have something to say about that as well. Now, speaking of Drake May and North Carolina, coming in at number 3, North Carolina 8-4 and 5-3 in conference. Now, with North Carolina, this is where it gets a little tricky, where the standings begin to get a little tricky without these divisions. Because I have North Carolina taking 3 losses. And you say, what are those 3 losses? Well, I think they'll lose at Clemson. I think they'll lose at Georgia Tech. I think they'll take an upset there. And I think that they'll lose at home against Miami, in my opinion. I think those are the games. But then I think they go to Pitt September 23rd and get that dub, get it going. And then I think their non-con, it's rough. I mean, they got South Carolina opening week. They got Appalachian State at home, Minnesota at home. All 3 games at home. You can easily see an 0-5 start, but I don't think so. I think South Carolina get them, then they'll rattle off the next 4. and then Miami will trip them up, and then Georgia Tech will trip them up 2 weeks later, and then Clemson, and then I think they'll beat NC State on the road. Rivalry game, I think they want to get them back. I think they want to teach them a lesson. I think 8-4, 5-3. I can honestly see a 6-6 if things, if injuries prevented or not. But North Carolina should be in good shape to finish third in the ACC. Jackson Johnson points out the September schedule of UNC is tough. I agree. I mean, like I pointed out, versus South Carolina, versus App State, versus Minnesota, then at Pitt. That is a gauntlet. If they can go 3-1, be glad. Jackson Johnson also points out South Carolina, App State, Minnesota, plus their first conference game at Pitt is scary. I agree, but I think North Carolina and Mac Brown have the tools. I think they're a very good team. I think, Pitt is a very scary place to play, but teams have gone in and won there before. And I see the same thing happening with North Carolina. I think after a tough September, I think they find a way to grind this out. Jackson Johnson also points out, don't be surprised if App State upsets NC. You're absolutely right. We could see another Texas A&M debacle and sets North Carolina off on the wrong path. Absolutely, Jackson. I agree. I mean, there's just a lot of things that can go wrong. But I think 8-4 is the proper ceiling. I think anything below 8-4, some things would have had to go wrong. Speaking of things that might go wrong or might not, number 4, Pittsburgh at 8-4 and 5-3. Now, this is where the tiebreakers come into play. So Pitt, obviously, they got Wolford and Cincinnati first 2 games of the season, and then they go at West Virginia for the backyard brawl. That's a tricky game, and that's why I believe North Carolina may get them there, because they're coming off of a tough, grinded-out win against West Virginia, and I think North Carolina gets them, and that's how they earn the tiebreaker. But then, as you go on, as you will see down their schedule, September 30th at Virginia Tech, then they get my boys 2 weeks to prepare at home. That's probably going to be a win. Then they go at Notre Dame on the 28th. Yikes. Talk about not easy. And then Florida State at home, Syracuse, Boston College, and at Duke. It's a pretty manageable schedule. I think, all things considered, I think Pitt, are they being underestimated? I think a little bit. I think if you look at it, could they beat Notre Dame on the road? Sure. Could we give them this? Could we give them a win against North Carolina? We could, but that was a flip-flop game. They could also lose to Cincinnati and West Virginia, possibly, all depending on how things play out. I honestly think it's going to be tough. I know a lot of people are thinking Pitt could possibly contend with Clemson. Is a real possibility. I just think they fall a little short. They have a tough schedule, playing Florida State, North Carolina, West Virginia. I think Cincinnati won't be a walk in the park. Duke won't be a walk in the park. But it's very interesting. And Jackson points out, one thing about Pitt is that they are scary at home. Absolutely. Now, when predicting Pitt's schedule, there's a lot of games, like I said, I had to go through and kind of pick about, where do I want to put Pitt at in terms of the standings and record, because there's always those trip-ups and everything else in between, injuries. Pat Narduzzi always seems to get Pitt on track when it matters most. But I think 8-4 seems right. Maybe 9-3. Maybe they beat North Carolina, or maybe they steal one from Florida State. State in there. I'm not sold yet. I think 8-4 is good for now. Now, here's where it gets even more clustered. At number 5, NC State at 8-4, 5-3. Looking at their schedule, week 1 they go at UConn. I think they're going to beat UConn. They had a fantastic season last year, but let's be honest, UConn, the Cinderella story is kind of over. Notre Dame, that's a tough game, but it's at home. It could week 2 that could be a game that they win, but I said they would lose that game. Then they got Virginia. Then they got my boys at home on the 29th of Friday night. At home, I think they get us. I think they beat Miami. I think they lose to North Carolina. They get Wake and Virginia Tech. I don't think they beat Clemson. Not yet. Not yet. Possibly. Sorry, correction. I do have them beating Clemson. Clemson. Well, correction on that. But I think it's going to be one of those games that's very interesting to see. I think NC State could be a surprise team in the ACC possibly. Who knows what's coming from them? You know, they did lose Devin Leary, which is a big loss for them. And if NC State can stay healthy, they can have a great season. But they couldn't stay healthy at quarterback last year, and that derailed a lot of their season. And I feel like if they have the same thing happen again, it could be very interesting. They could cause a lot of havoc. But I still think that they're a team that could contend this year if they could stay healthy. And I think 8-4, especially with that upset at home against Clemson, because Clemson plays Notre Dame the week after, could catch spoiler. I have them beating them there. And Jackson points out, I'm still amazed by Pitt Cincinnati on CW. It's better than reruns of Riverdale. That's a good point, Jackson. That is a good point to point out, good buddy. Good point to point out. I mean, let's be honest. We all need a little football in our life. Now at number 6, my boys at Louisville. Go Cards. So, I had to put my homerish aside on this. Had to be honest. I see us going 8-4 this year, 5-3. You look at our schedule. You know, the fact that we have a new head coach, Jeff Brom, as I pointed out earlier, is going to be very interesting. But if you look at our schedule, we open up with the Aflac kickoff game September 1st, Friday, against Georgia Tech. I think we can win that game. Murray State, Indiana, I think those are some wins. I think we get revenge on Boston College. Then we go at NC State. I think that's where we kind of hit the road a little bit, where we kind of find out what we're made of there. I think the week after that, we got Notre Dame and then at Pitt. That's 3 tough games in a row. I think 3 losses. And then I kind of think we bounce back, kind of hit our stride coming down the stretch, and then I think we slip up at Miami, and then I think we beat Kentucky rivalry week. I think, you know, could we slip up to Duke? Sure. Virginia Tech, possibly. I hope not, personally, but we could, just knowing the team that we have. And it'll be very interesting. Yes. Jackson Johnson, great point that he points out. One thing that will help Louisville is the first 4 weeks. Yes. I 100% agree. The first 4 weeks, we're already halfway there to bowl eligibility. That's a big reason why I said 8-4, because I think we'll be able to crank out 2 wins, at least 4 more wins, 2 to 4 more wins in there somewhere in between that 3-game rough stretch. It'll be interesting because I know Purdue fans have told me, be careful with Jeff Brom. His clock management can sometimes be suspect. I agree. I've watched a lot of Purdue, and his clock management has been a little suspect. Just a little bit. But overall, I'm hoping for a great season. I just don't think we're on the level of Clemson or Florida State just quite yet. NC State, Pitt, North Carolina, those are all some great teams. I just think we're right there with them, but I just don't think we're over that hump just yet. Now, speaking of over the hump, so to speak, number 7, Wake Forest, 7-5, 4-4 in conference. Now, they're a team that needs to find a new quarterback because Sam Hartman is at Notre Dame. And now, can Wake manufacture the wins? Is their offense still going to be good? The defense is always normally pretty persistent. So, could they still make a bowl? Could they still make an impact? Looking at their schedule, first week of the season, their first 4 games are pretty winnable. Then after that, it kind of gets a little tricky with Clemson. They go at Clemson on October 7th. I don't think they beat Clemson this year. Then they got Pitt and Florida State back-to-back weeks at home. I don't think they win those games. Then they got NC State, and then Sam Hartman pays a visit to his old friends. Well, they pay a visit to him because they go at Notre Dame, and then they go to Syracuse, which Syracuse is always a crazy place to play, especially in the Dome because it is cursed. Just ask Clemson fans about that. Everyone remembers the Kelly Bryant years in Clemson and the walk-off field goal loss that essentially hurt Clemson's chances to be a number 1 seed in the playoffs. Almost. But for Wake, I want to say 7-5. I want to say they're still going to manufacture enough wins. Their schedule seems pretty manageable. I think with anything that's possible in the ACC, as bad as it's been, you can always manufacture those wins somehow, somewhere. And just looking at the schedule, they go at Virginia Tech, at Duke, Syracuse. They got Old Dominion, Vandy, Elon, and no, not Elon Musk. And Georgia Tech, you can find some wins in there somewhere, somehow. I think 7 wins. I think that's a good standard to set, but it'll be very interesting to find out where it all stands. Now, moving on to the preseason national champions, the Miami Hurricanes. Oh, brother, you want to talk about hype? Miami has always got the hype. Florida State has nothing on the Hurricanes. Coming in at number 8, of course, Miami. I have them at 7-5 and 4-4 in conference, as well with Wake. So you look at Miami, they're a very interesting team. Can Mario Cristobal apply what he did at Oregon? Can he bring it to Miami? We will have to see about that. And looking at their schedule, week 1, Friday night, Miami, Ohio, that's more than likely going to be a win. Then they got Texas A&M at home. That's a very interesting game because Texas A&M has got a lot of things interesting going for them as well. I think they will win this game. Now, then they get Bethune Cook and then they go at Temple. Now you may say you have only 4 conference losses. Who is that fifth loss? Well, I'm saying that maybe Temple surprises them and beats them at home because that's the Miami thing to do. They win a big game and then just blow it. And I think Temple might be more scary of a team than people think. I think Miami, they're going to have a game like they did against Middle Tennessee State, in my opinion. And I think Temple gets them. At home. And then after that, they got Georgia Tech, North Carolina. They got Virginia, Clemson, Florida State, my guys at Louisville, BC at NC State. So they've got some interesting games in there. Obviously, I don't think they're going to get Clemson. I don't think they're going to get Florida State or NC State. They'll get my guys at Louisville. I think they could beat BC. But I think North Carolina, it'll be an interesting game. Right now, I have North Carolina winning that game. But it could very well go the other way just for the fact of we lost to Temple. We need to redeem ourselves in a hurry. Now, do we think North Carolina, Mario Cristobal, could he be on the hot seat after 2 years? I don't think so. I think if they go 7-5 like I'm predicting, he should be safe. But there's always that chance that he's not, and it could turn out worse than imagined. But I think he should be safe for now. And Miami could look forward to a bowl game. They're not quite there yet. Obviously, they have all the talent, but Miami is Miami still. Now, talk about a team that maybe flies under the radar. At number 9, the Duke Blue Devils. I have them going 7-5 and 3-5 in conference. Duke last year, great season. Mike Elko took them to 8-4 and took them to a major bowl game, and they ended up holding on and winning that game. Now, I think a lot of last year, I think they had a lot of help from the schedule. I think this year the schedule doesn't favor them as much because if you look at it, they got Clemson to open up. You know, many people believe, maybe, just maybe, there's an upset on the horizon. It is in Duke. I think Clemson's going to be too much for them. Then they get Lafayette. Then they get Northwestern, who's falling in shambles right now. I think they could start off 3-1 because then they go at UConn after Northwestern. Then they get Notre Dame, NC State, Florida State, my guys at Louisville. Yikes. That's not an easy stretch. And then they get Wake, North Carolina, Virginia, Pittsburgh. I think they can shock some people and maybe catch North Carolina napping. They could possibly catch Wake if things go right. Catch my guys at Louisville. But as for Duke, I think the schedule is not as favorable. And plus, I think Mike Elko is going to continue to do what he does. But I have my doubts in Duke just a wee bit. I was almost tempted to put them at 6-6, but I think they'll eke out a win somewhere in there where you don't at least expect it or don't think about it. Now, speaking of teams that you don't expect or could eke out some wins, the Syracuse Orange at number 10, I have them going 6-6 and 3-5. Now, Syracuse, the first 4 weeks of the season is very, very interesting. So they got Colgate, Western Michigan. Obviously, those are wins. Then they go at Purdue. You know, last year in that game, there was a very controversial kind of call there. You know, maybe they gone Syracuse way. It was in the Dome. Now they're coming to Purdue. I think they pull this off. You know, Army at home the next week. Potential trap game because Clemson's coming to town, and Syracuse always plays Clemson super tough. And then they go at North Carolina, at Florida State, 3 consecutive weeks. My goodness. Syracuse, I wish you luck for those 3 weeks because you're going to need it. And then it kind of gets a little easier. Then they get Virginia Tech, Boston College, and then they get Pittsburgh at a neutral site, I believe in Yankee Stadium. I believe that's where the venue is at, which ought to be fun. And then they get Georgia Tech, Wake. So they got some winnable games. They're going to have to win a lot of their non-cons in order to ensure that they make this bowl because their conference does not conference schedule is not looking too delectably easy. It's they got the hard end of the stick, so to speak, with Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, and Pitt. That right there could be some interesting stuff going on right there. There for Syracuse, can Dino Babers keep it together? If he has another 6-6 season, Syracuse could put him on the hot seat. I know I've talked to some people about that, and they've said possibly if he has another collapse, if they start say 6-0 again, and then they have another collapse, possibly. But I don't think he'll have to worry about another 6-0 start because let's be honest, with the schedule I just read off, I think 6-6 they could possibly miss a bowl altogether. Now, coming in at number 11, I have the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Yellow Jackets at 5-7, 2-6 conference. Now, a lot of people, think Georgia Tech and Brent Keys can make a bowl, maybe even somehow squeak out a 7th win. Well, I think they're going to fall just shy of that, in my opinion. Opening day, Aflac kickoff, neutral site in Atlanta. I think we get them on September 1st. Then the next week, South Carolina State. I think they got that under control. Then they go at Ole Miss and at Wake. Ooh, those are 2 tough games. Then they get Bowling Green. Okay, kind of give them a little cream puff in there. Then they get Miami on the road, Boston College, North Carolina, Virginia. Then they go at Clemson. Yikes. And then they get Syracuse and then Georgia at home. Yeah. I think 5 wins is being nice. I could see a world where they go 4-8, possibly 3-9 if things don't fall their way, because Boston College could end up beating them. Virginia could sneak out a win. I mean, who knows? Maybe Bowling Green somehow sneaks out a win and spoils Georgia Tech's season. I think they're just going to fall a little shy of making a bowl, just a little bit. Not by much, but I think they're going to fall a little shy, especially with that schedule. And there is also news to be reported that Haynes King will be the quarterback at Georgia Tech. Now, that's interesting because of Miami. He had a lot of potential, just never lived up to it. Can he come to Georgia Tech, run Brent Key's offense, and get it going? Possibly. Maybe. But Georgia Tech, they're towards the bottom half, in my opinion. I think they'll be one of those teams that may play spoiler if they're given the chance. But I just don't see. I don't think they'll make a bowl, but they could. But for right now, I'm going to say they come up just a little short. And then coming in at number 12, the Virginia Cavaliers at 5-7 and 2-6. Now, I know that seems a little too high for some people, but I think Tony Elliott's going to right the ship and he's going to get this fixed. I think he's going to have a better season for Virginia. I think he's going to get it going. I think this season he's going to make it better. I think they're finally going to understand what he's brought from Clemson to them. But I will say, looking at their schedule, they open up against Tennessee. I don't think they're going to win that game. Then they get James Madison. Could James Madison get them? Then they go at Maryland. Those are 2 flip-flop games for me, personally. Then they get NC State at home. Then they get Boston College. Then they get William Mary, North Carolina, Miami, Georgia Tech, my boys at Louisville, Duke, Virginia Tech. I could see 5 wins, maybe a possible 6 if they play spoiler to my guys, or maybe they catch North Carolina, or who knows, maybe they catch Maryland. It's very interesting for sure for Virginia, but I think Virginia, they're almost a bowl team. I think be vastly improved, but I don't see them. being a team that's competing anytime soon. I think Tony Elliott, this is going to be a gradual rebuild. And that's the sad thing about all this is Virginia used to be a really good team. They used to be a team that was, wasn't too long ago, they were in the Orange Bowl. And now they're kind of degraded to this, barely missing a bowl. It's just, it's sad days for Virginia, I think. And it's one of those things, it's what happens in college football. You lose all your talent, lose all your coaches, and it just percuffles you. Speaking of losing talent if they ever had any, number 13, Boston College. I have them at a record of 4-8 and 2-6 overall in the ACC. Now, can Phil Jurkovec stay healthy? Is the question for them. They lost Save Flowers. He's going to be a hard one to replace. Obviously, the Ravens got him a stud at receiver. But I think Boston College, it's just going to be one of those, it's going to be another thing for Boston College of another rough year that, as you can tell, 4-8, looking at their schedule, they got Northern Iowa, Holy Cross, Florida State the first 3 weeks. I see 2-1, and then they got my guys as they got to come up here to the Ville. Then they get Virginia, then they go at Army, and then they get UConn. So there's not any given games here. At Syracuse, at Pitt, Virginia Tech. I mean, I was being gracious of possibly giving them 4 wins, but looking at it, it may be a really rough year for the Golden Eagles of Boston College. Could be very rough. Could they possibly, steal a win somewhere in fashion that they do? Sure. Could they go at Pitt and steal a win? That might be pushing it. Could they come up here to the Ville and get us again this year? Possibly. Could they get Georgia Tech? Sure. Could they go to Syracuse? Sure. Could they get Florida State at home? I don't think so. Like I said, I think Florida State, after losing to LSU, I think they'll have Boston College to beat up on and start their conference record off good. That is right before Clemson, though, so you never know. But I just think for right now, Boston College, it's a rough year ahead, I think, for the Eagles. Now, for the last place team, number 14, Virginia Tech, at 3-9 and 1-7. Yikes. Virginia Tech, back up the dump truck and come and get it, because there is not much hope. I know people are saying Brent Fry is a really good coach, give him a chance, but I just think after the year he had last couple years, I think Virginia Tech's not going to be any better this year. I think looking at their schedule, September 2nd, Old Dominion, I think they win. September 9th against Purdue, they could possibly win that game. At Rutgers, maybe. Marshall. Notre Dame fans remember Marshall. That could be a loss. Pittsburgh at home. No. Florida State. No. Wake, Syracuse, my guys. Boston College. NC State. I mean, good grief. And then at Virginia, I think the only realistic win I see is at Virginia right now, because it is a rivalry game. Maybe Boston College, maybe. But I just don't have much faith. I just do not have much faith in Virginia Tech. And maybe they'll prove me wrong, and maybe they'll make a bowl somehow. But I just don't have much faith. And I think they're in for a rough year. I think they're in for a rough year. And with all that being said, that leads me to the ACC Championship game, where I have Clemson over Florida State, and Clemson, once again, reigns supreme and wins yet another ACC title. I think They beat Florida State in the regular season. I think they beat them again. And I think the hype on Florida State is over. I think then they realize, oh, shoot, we bet on the wrong horse again. And I hate to say it, but Clemson runs the ACC. I would like to think Louisville could possibly get there, but got to be realistic with it. I could also see, though, while I'm on the subject, could North Carolina, NC State, Pitt overtake Florida State? Sure. But I think for right now, I think this is the right championship prediction, in my opinion. Let me know in the comments your ACC championship game prediction, who you have winning. Let me know some of your records, because it's going to be a very interesting season of ACC football. I think this year the conference will be a little bit more competitive, a little more better than it was, but not much. I think the ACC is nowhere near what it once was. I think, as far as my money goes, the ACC's anywhere from the third to fourth best conference, possibly. But I think it'll be a really good, fun, competitive year. I'm looking forward to watching some ACC football. And I appreciate you all joining us tonight. And I appreciate everyone in the comments. I appreciate all the people out there. Please make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think, where you think I got it right, where I got it wrong. Let me know. And until next time, I'm out. Peace.